you're one of those people who, for my generation, it's as if you've always been in the public eye. So I want to start when you weren't. I want to start in the family pub back in Essex, and the first realisation that food and you were kind of inextricable. The relationship that you had with food that's different from most kids.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a little village called Clavering in Essex. I lived in the local pub. My mum and dad still together, still work there now. Dad still does the breakfast every day. I didn't know then, but he was a pioneer of what we would call a gastropub. So then and now, sort of 5-6 chefs on a shift, pastry all made on site, whole animals, game, local British food, but also an eye open to sort of foods around the world.
How come he went down that route so early?
He grew up in a pub.
Okay.
My uncle's got a pub. It's all publicans. But I think what we probably forget is the concept of good food in a pub is new.
That's what I mean. If he's ahead of the game, it's chicken in a basket and scampi.
And this was 40 years ago. So I was born in Ockington, in sort of the Thames estuary, sort of nearish to Grays and Southend. My dad came from Southend, and then we went pretty much as soon as I was born to a little village called Clavering, and it was a craggy old pub, and he just put his heart into it, and that was my home. So I lived above the pub for most of my life, and I think it was a beautiful existence and
happy family.
A happy family.
Busy though. You don't see much of your parents, I suppose, until
they were always working there. I didn't. Right. You're absolutely right, because now I'm a parent. I'm comparing it to my parenting or access or how regularly, and so I didn't see Dad that much because he was always working, but he was always there, which felt as good. Okay. And in part of a family and a team in a restaurant and a pub, you strangely acquire, like the girls that worked in the restaurant were like my aunties, surrogate mums. I mean, I actually remember vividly throwing up on most of them as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, just being ill. I know that they changed my nappy. And there is a sort of like gentle form of love that's a bit more than just an acquaintance that you get from those girls. And you know, my dad's staff stay a long time. And in the country, of course, it's not as kind of competitive as the city. So, you know, there were 30-year-old women that when I was a kid that were 65 when they're still there, you know.
Where did his inspiration come from food-wise then? Because as you say, he's way ahead of the game, and there wouldn't have been many places that he could have pointed at as, I want to be like that.
Well, he was student of the year in Southend College.
Was he? And
then he went and worked in France. And then he came back and was a very young publican in a very rough pub in Ockington.
Yeah.
And when I was born, I think he looked around him and thought, got to get out of here. This is not where I want to bring a kid up. And I mean that respectively. It was quite a rough pub. And he was actually the youngest liquor licensee in the country at the time.
Was he really?
Yeah. And mum and dad were a brilliant team, which is important in a family business.
But the food stuff, the idea of bringing in a whole animal, the idea of serving up creative food in an Essex pub, where did he get that idea from? Do you know?
I just think he felt it was common sense.
Really?
I don't think it's rocket science. I think, you know, there is nothing more beautiful and inclusive than having a pint and having a beautiful pie or a beautiful dish. And obviously running a business is really tough, as most people that run any business knows. And when you're in the middle of nowhere in the country, at a time when the sort of police and drink driving clamps down, you can't, everyone used to drink and drive, then they didn't. So like on a Monday in the depths of winter, Dad was doing Mexican nights, and no one within 100 miles would have ever had a taco or a tortilla or a burrito. This is 40 years ago, bro.
I didn't know this.
Indian nights,
really,
and like he kind of, if truth be said, he probably 3/4 got it right. It was British version of, but of course, if you live in the country, that's a night out. It's normally bundled with a good price. There's bloody flags everywhere, you know, and everyone's getting a little bit of Mexico in Clavering.
So how come he didn't want to have 100 cricketers' arms? Because
he's just like the real deal. You know, he's just the real deal. He's just focused on his business, his world, his life.
But no empire ambitions.
No, he's just like a robust
You're really proud of him, aren't you?
And Mum, they're a brilliant team. Mum did all the books, and she was like, certainly for most of the time, the classic landlady. She'd get her rollers on. Do you remember rollers?
Yeah, of course.
And she'd have that hairspray that was in the gold bottle that stunk. And she'd like get, even on a Tuesday night, she'd get like
Glammed up.
Yeah, and then
up to the 9.
8:30. I sell. Yeah, hello, darling. It was all of that. But I think I've only, when I left for London, I left to go and see the big boys and learn from the Rue boys and get to the Ritz and the kind of the Michelin stars. And it took me about 10 years to realise how great Mum and Dad were technically, operationally, in the industry. I never realised until later it was just work, and I loved it. But also what was interesting is, as I've been challenged over the years in many different ways, I realised that my real school and my real learning was the pub. And actually, and I don't know if you can kind of resonate with this, like as we look around us at this beautiful country that we are very lucky to live in, actually, really, the pub is possibly the most democratic place in the country. Everyone's welcome. When I grew up as a little kid to a teenager, that and working and serving people, or just being a kid and sitting with them, I sat with Zimmer frames and old age pensioners having a little half a sherry, or a little stout. My best friends were gypsies and cockneys. There was city boys there, having the posh wine and the posh whiskey, single malts. And
this is partly why you don't get intimidated by anyone. You can walk in to see a CEO, or you can be chatting to somebody who's delivered the beer, and you don't seem to change your demeanour, whoever you're dealing with.
I think I tweak my demeanour, because if I saw the Queen, I'd probably speak a bit better.
Would you?
Yeah, I'd soften my. And if I was down, if I'm like hanging out in the ghetto, like I get a little, I do tweak myself slightly.
We had Plan B on last week, sitting in that chat, and I had to stop myself from doing that, from going all Phil Mitchell or something.
I think the intent,
but you don't do that.
Yeah, I don't do it too much. I think the intent is that you want to level.
Yes.
And I think the pub was very good at levelling people, and it was a kind of magnet of the community, and people laughed, argued.
And still do.
And really had conversations like you have on your radio show.
With anyone.
Yeah.
With all comers. So do you remember realising that it was that bit of the pub that you felt a spiritual? It was the kitchen, not the office, not the front of house, not the bar, but the kitchen was where something resonated with you that didn't resonate anywhere else? Well,
a few things happened. I think like in primary school, because I'd always had the, look, my teachers were all amazing, but I was always kind of the thick kid. I wasn't achieving what was considered normal or average.
Because you struggled to read, basic.
Yeah, and I didn't really, and dyslexia wasn't really easily found in those days, and dyslexia was kind of thought of then as an on-off button, and everyone with dyslexia literally had the thickest glasses on the planet, and it was like proper hardcore. Whereas mine is sort of an unusual dyslexia. I do struggle to read, and I've had to develop ways of blagging it, and
you're conscious of this even at primary?
Yeah, like because a lot of my job, like yours, is auto cue or script, and actually what I've got very good at memorising.
Okay.
And then what happens is, because you're pretending to read a script. Yes, you get it wrong, so then you have to develop ways of being able to get it wrong and get it right. But then really what you become, you chat instead of speech. So that's helped me in some respects. So I don't think being dyslexic has to be a negative. It can be a positive. But also I think like,
it's tough at school though, because no one wants to stand out, do they, at that age?
No, and I always, certainly in secondary school, I was always in special needs. So you get yanked out of class, and because I was sort of like, I got on with many types of people in the class. I wasn't bullied, but like I can see why kids do get bullied for that kind of.
You kind of were. You say you weren't bullied. The story that I've heard you tell before is when you and your fellow special needs students would stand up. Everyone starts singing special needs to the tune of Let It Be.
Yeah, that is so true.
You see, you can laugh about that, and good. It's the healthiest way to respond to it. Other kids would be haunted by that still today.
I think so. And actually, in my time doing events or Q&As or demonstrations, and it always nearly gets me.
Right.
Like you'll get a 7, 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old boy, girl, saying why they feel just completely compromised, patronised because of dyslexia.
Yeah.
And it's seen as a disability, not
you never
a
had
superpower.
That.
I think I lucked out.
Yeah, clearly.
But I know for a fact probably the majority of kids get singled out and they feel bad about it, and it upsets them. And obviously now as a parent, there's nothing that upsets me more than a kid that feels there's enough to feel bad about, you know, without getting into boyfriends, girlfriends, hormones, social media, and all that old banter. But I think like what is normal is obviously a normal part of growing up and finding your space. But I do remember I remember going to sort of like a parents' evening, and it was just all bad news, and that was great. Put that to bed, but it's not the end of the world. Crack on. But I do remember at the age of about 11, cooking. My responsibility was to cook a full Monty roast dinner at home in between shifts at the pub for the family. And it was good. And Dad went, "Well done, son, that was amazing." And my hairs went, "Ah!"
Oh, mate.
And I remember, and like, you look, us humans or animals or mammals, whatever you want to call us, like, we're pretty basic, you know. I think in life it's best to stick to what makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And
that was a proper
cooking
moment.
got me the credit that school or anything else. I mean, I love football, but I was never good at it.
Right.
So cooking kind of got me that pat on the back that I think everyone needs something, a version of.
To be good at something.
Yeah.
Just to feel valued and valuable.
And there's another little story that confirmed that, which was two of my mates were good mates, were gypsies. And I'll never forget BMX time, ET, in between shifts at the pub, like the curtains would get closed. It would close at 3:00, but the buffet's there, the bar's there. I'd run in, and we'd all have a job. So we'd be kind of getting drinks, we'd getting packets of crisps or nuts, and you know, when you take the nuts away, there'd be like normally a nice sexist woman half undressed behind there. So as a 13-year-old, that was fun. No, but I used to make sandwiches, but really good sandwiches. Anyway, it was like a packed lunch. So we get on our bikes and we go off into the forest. And I never forget one day, because my mate didn't have a very wide spectrum of foods that he ate. And it sounds really pretentious, and it possibly is, but it wasn't intended to be. We were in this clearing having a picnic, and he went to eat this smoked salmon sandwich that I'd made. I did do a cheese and Branston pickle one just to sort of, you know, balance it out a bit. But I stopped him just as we went to eat it, said, "Open it." And he was like, "What?" And I put a bit of lemon juice in there, and he put it in his gob, and his eyes peeled back. And he'd never had smoked anything and lemon in his mouth. He was like, "Oh my God, what is that?" We were only like 11.
Sure.
And it was a bit of a kind of ratatouille moment. And it was daft and silly, but then I went, just a minute. Like, it's not just about me feeling good about cooking. Like, people, like, when you've never tried something before and it's delicious, like, it's very visceral. And I knew then, like, yeah, I'm in for this.
Seriously?
Yeah.
It's like a proper moment.
Yeah, a complete moment. I'll never forget it. And I knew, like, the power of food as an enjoyment, as a seducer. I hadn't even got anywhere near to the concept.
And you can be the man that can open the door that these people wouldn't have gone through otherwise.
Yeah.
See, you use the word pretentious, which is slightly self-deprecating. I know why you mean it. But if you were French, it wouldn't have entered your mind that there was anything pretentious about helping your mate. Isn't it? Isn't that a strange thing? Because also Essex, you'd think, would be England squared. But in fact, you were growing up in an environment that was experimental, that did encourage people to kind of, you grew up in the environment that you've tried to perhaps share with a broader public since.
And my dad's pub was normal, but of course it wasn't normal.
No.
There was homemade pâté there.
Right.
That would be sold very reasonably.
Yeah.
With toast. You know, everyone was having tin salmon and we had smoked salmon. It was not normal. No. You know, we'd be chipping. I spent my life chipping potatoes. My knife skills are as good now as they were when I was 9. Wow. I used to stand on a Grolsch crate to be tall enough to prep. And we used to prep. And I think it's interesting because people are quite scared about kitchen hot things, sharp things with kids. But like, I was 9 and I was rattling those blades. And I think the concept of respecting blades, knives, respecting how you use it, how you carry it, how you walk around it. I mean, you can die from an inch. Yeah, of course. You know, and you're sitting there as a 9-year-old holding a 10-inch blade.
Yes.
But also...
Respect. You're learning respect.
And also life's too short. as a normal consumer or human to be rubbish at knife skills. I mean, one of our most popular lessons in my cookery school is you come in, hour and a half, you walk in rubbish at knife skills, you walk out great. And like, really? Like, you can do that? Like, looking a donut for 30, 40 years of life with a knife is not even cool. So even from an ego point of view, you're not going to pull more, you're not going to impress, you're not going to be as fast or efficient. But no, I think, but what the point I'm trying to make is what? Kids are amazing. See what kids do on Britain's Got Talent. And let them. BMXs at the time, we were doing endos, ollies, skateboarding, and then we got a problem with the kitchen.
But you must have had a serious side, Jamie, then, because you're working earlier than most kids are. You're out with your mates, you're knocking around in the woods. I love those two stories. The first time your dad gave you the impression that you might have been a cut above when you made the Sunday lunch, and then seeing your friend react to the combination of flavours that you'd introduced him to. That speaks of thoughtfulness, whether you realised it at the time or not. I
think I've always been softy.
Right.
I've always been...
You've done it again. That's self-deprecate. It's not soft to be thoughtful.
Romantic.
Okay, that's better.
Very loyal.
Yes.
Yes. And
deep.
I think I have always been, but I've only really... I've discovered it quite slowly, you know, because and I just want to be honest with you. I am, and certainly was, a proper dickhead. Like, honestly, I like, if you'd have known me as a kid, like, I was a dickhead. I mean, I couldn't stop doing boob, bum, willy jokes. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, it wasn't bright stuff. It wasn't technical jokes. It wasn't even clever jokes. It was just like a volume of crap. And I loved it. And I'm not, it might not have been my fault, because in the kitchen, you got to remember, I was like 8, 9, 10, and I was in a brigade of 25, 30-year-olds talking about knobs and tits and sort of all the filth that goes along. And it's not because they're dim or stupid. Like, being a chef is very, very repetitive. It's all very well prepping a box of porcini, but when you got 3, and it's the same every day, right? So you have to master the art of talking bollocks. And are we allowed to swear on this show?
We are now.
You can bleep it, sorry.
No, we swear away.
But I'm not swearing for effect. I'm just saying
this was the environment. It's
very sweary,
banter and
very
vulgarity.
sweary, very regimental. It was set up as a French regimental kitchen in the country, in Essex. You had a fish section, a meat section. You had a pastry. You had starters. You had a prep chef, and there was a head chef, sous chef, chef de partie.
Wow.
And they didn't curb their language because I was 9,
and
or because I was the boss's
boss. And your dad didn't want them to either, because he knew that their sensibilities have to be.
So I was maybe slightly supercharged in filth.
Yes, but that isn't what I asked you. It's more this notion of being a thoughtful, even though you might have been quite wild in a lot of ways. You were at quite an early age. You were taking on board quite big ideas. Otherwise, I don't think you would have moved to London at such a young age and sought to learn from the so-called masters, would you? You had a big picture in your mind even then.
I think I don't often think about. You're making me think about emotions that I haven't thought about for a very long time.
Good.
I think what is beautiful about this is not in a pretentious way or a kind of trying to get points way. If I get in an Uber, right?
Yeah.
I say, hello, sir. I ain't got no problem calling someone sir. I spent my childhood clearing cigarette ashtrays. Yeah. Hello, sir. Yeah, welcome, sir. Come. Hello, the cricketers. Hello, sir. Yes, you know. And if I couldn't answer the question, let me just take your number and I'll get back to you. Like, I could have been 7.
Yeah.
I could have been 7. You burn the boxes. You clean the toilets. You polish the brass where the boys piss. Do you know what I mean? There ain't no job I haven't done in the pub, and I'm not better than anyone. And everyone, sir or madam.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with opening a door, not just to a woman or a man.
Sure.
So the concept of serving the public is a pub and a publican, and it's not a bad thing. It's not
quite un-English again, though, isn't it?
But it's lovely to love people. It's lovely to cook for people. To put a plate of food in front of someone when they're hungry and say, "Well, do you want anything else?" Mum used to say, "Just treat everyone like they're kids." Like, because they don't know anything here. They don't know where everything is. Just handhold them through the whole thing. You know, do you want any mustards with that? You know, you kind of that whole sort of nurturing. And I think possibly that's where the thoughtfulness comes from.
Okay.
And
consideration, isn't it? That you're describing, just taking into account that other people are coming at.
But it was just normal, right?
Yeah, clearly, no,
it wasn't
I get
really
that.
trained. It was quite normal.
And when then did you? Because from what you've been saying, at this point, if I was to predict where you'd be 40 years later,
oh God,
I think you'd have just taken over the pub from your dad. So at what point did you think I want more than this?
Well,
and I'm going to second guess you now, because when I say I want more than this, you're thinking that could be construed as dissing my dad in a way.
No.
Good.
Not at all.
It's not.
No, we had a plan, mate.
We
had a plan. The plan was like, look, I've given you everything we can give. And
he knew you were special by this point, did he? I have to use
I mean, I think he loved his son. Special. He knew I could cook half decent, and he was proud of me, as was Mum. And we had two plans. One, the kind of distant conversation of could I take over the pub, but don't forget he was quite young, so you don't want to give the goose away with
back in your box.
But we definitely, it was go away, learn, bring some contemporary skills back to the countryside, which we know so well, and maybe 10, 15, 20 miles away would get you another little kind of decrepit pub and 60 covers, decent wine list, small but brilliant team, and we had that down, and we were going to get that.
Okay.
Like that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I could have done that as a young boy, but London happened, and I probably was still going to do that until The Naked Chef happened.
So you were still garnering skills. You were still broadening your horizons with the plan to go back.
Yes,
and just move the family business onto a new level.
We were absolutely skint. Jules was working in Maxwell's in Hampstead. There's one in Covent Garden, I think now, and it was sort of like an Americana place.
The brasserie
she was the breadwinner. She'd get like 50 quid a night cash tips, and we were skint, and but we loved London. I'd been lucky enough to work with Antonio Carluccio Gennaro at the Neal Street restaurant, which was a foraging mushroom restaurant. Amazing.
How did you land that? How did you get through the door there?
Do you know what? I'm going to give you all the stories tonight. So it was another bit of, on the last day of college, I went to college for 3 years.
That was in Westminster.
And I travelled 2 hours to and then 2 hours back. From there, I was still under the realms of Mummy, and she loved her boy. But for the first time in my academic career, I flourished because I could translate it. So we were doing science, French. I did the BTEC, MVQ 1, 2 and 3, and because it was a crossover year, City and Guild 706 1 and 2. So I smashed the back doors out of everything. Distinctions, A's.
How did that feel?
Oh my God, it was like hallelujah. Hallelujah, praise the Lord. And there was purpose to, learning the science of food poisoning and botulism and kind of Staphylococcus aureus and all of that stuff. Before that, I just couldn't make any sense out of it. But on the last day, the lecturer said, Mr. Richards, he said, right, boys, girls, where do you want to be in a year from now? Great question,
isn't it?
And it's not particularly. Everyone was kind of like, I want to go and work with this chef, that chef, Michelin stars, Raymond Blanc.
Did you spoke that language by now? You knew who these people were, and 100%. Because of the nature of the course, and the learning.
Yeah, and absolutely. The Ritz, the Gavroche. And I just said, I want to learn how to make the best pasta in London. And the whole room pissed themselves as if it was a stupid answer.
Really?
And my mate Marco, who sadly from that day I've never, ever seen since, he was an Italian boy. His family used to run a little Italian cafe near Channel 4 building. Absolutely gorgeous boy. He was a bit older than me, maybe 4 years older than me. Being Italian, he was offended as I was on behalf of pasta.
By the laughter.
Yeah. So and he said, look, there's two people. One's my dad, and he runs a deli. I think it's La Camisa in Soho.
Yeah, on Old Compton Street.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an amazing
And he goes,
place.
look, he's upstairs, and he's sort of doing it for the shop. You need to go and see Gennaro Contaldo in the Neal Street restaurant. I didn't know who he was.
Sure.
I got home that night, and my wife, now then girlfriend, had torn out a job for the Neal Street restaurant for head pastry chef. So so massive luck. And I and I wasn't a pastry chef. I had spent a childhood making French meringue, Swiss meringue, Italian meringue, short crust pastry, puff pastry. I had done the fundamentals. So I did have the capacity to blag my way in, but I knew nothing about Italian desserts, which are amazing, but also kind of, they're not, I mean, it's an argument. Ice cream, sorbet, yes, but, arguably Anglo, French, Swiss desserts are kind of maybe a bit more advanced. So I just had to get books quick, like within 15 hours, and read and look, and it was very different because they were kind of making what the French or English would use with cream, they're using ricotta.
Right.
And so I had to learn a lot. Basically, I had to blag it, and I got the job. We did what they were calling those days a stage. So you go and do 2 days for free. If they like you, they might give you the job. And I got the job. And then I was head pastry chef at the Neal Street restaurant, but really I was a chef. But I just went with it. And really the only reason...
What was that like? What was that? Because it's the first time you've worked not for the family.
Amazing. The only Italians, apart from one German in the kitchen.
Really? What language were they speaking in most of the time?
And the head chef was English.
Okay.
But the maybe 15 of the chefs were Italian. But also, if you're from the north and the south, I mean, they're quite racist to each other.
Of course.
And it's hard banter.
Some proper tension.
And so
the boob jokes didn't cut it anymore.
No, unless it was an Italian. If it was an Italian, then you're all good. But it was in a basement. It was in Soho. I was the pastry chef, so I would work from 9 until 3, and then 6 until 1:30. And then after like about 4 months, I asked Antonio, could I do some work with Gennaro, because he used to bake through the night.
Okay.
And Antonio said no, because Gennaro was like Antonio's little secret, because he helped him with all the books and all the recipes, and often it's Gennaro's hands that were the close-up hands in Antonio's TV shows, because they do a second or a third pass.
Of course.
So
he doesn't want you falling under Gennaro's spell.
No, or nicking his golden bullet,
or vice versa.
So what I did, going back to boob jokes, was so I was a pastry chef, so I was last out the kitchen. Right. So I'm thinking, listen, if he's the Matrix, which is I'm led to believe he is, how do I get close to him when I'm not allowed to? I thought, well, I'm the last in the kitchen, so I'll measure out some water and yeast and flour so that he can kind of be a bit, okay, that's
ahead
cool.
Of the game.
Right, I'll get the ovens at the right temperature. Great. Okay, I've got 50 trays. And a nice little trick to really good baking. If you ever make bread and you want a crispy base, use the stale bread, whiz it up to breadcrumbs, and use that instead of flour, and you get the crispiest base. So we used to dust our trays with processed stale leftover bread. And better flavour as well. And I thought, well, look, I'm racking it up. But I'm racking up these dusted trays. I've got to draw a penis. So I rattle that in, and then because it's like, you've got to remember that Gennaro's coming at 3 a.m,
yeah,
and he's a man of the world, but he's alone. He's on his own, and I'm like, well, I've got to entertain him. Yes. So, and also I've got to do this in reverse because the tray goes up, right? So penis is the last one, and then I was really good at those. Boobs, bums, anything sort of genitally driven, very basic. This was my forte.
International, everyone speaks this language.
Cassata Siciliana, Swiss meringues and penises. What more to
repertoire?
But then I'd start.
And it worked.
Then I'd write Good Morning Gennaro. And I did that for like a month. And in the end, he said, look, don't worry about Antonio. You just come in. So then I was on for about 8 months, 3 shifts a day. Wow. So I'd finish at 1:30. Then I'd get back for 4 a.m. and do 4 till 7. So I was absolutely starved of sleep. But it was the best 9 months of... He said, you've got to stop now because you look like a bag of shite. And there's a lot of swearing in this. I do apologise. It's just
the naked chef.
But they're amazing times, and so
how did you and Jules stay together then? If you were seeing her for about 8 minutes a day,
well, I had days off, but she always worked on my days off, so I just hang around her restaurant when it was her days off. But I think we were so young and skint and happy to be alive and free, and I did have a car. I had a nice little Fiesta 950, and I just think at that age, like freedom
just fit into whatever, don't you?
Is everything you need. And
so you got under Gennaro's wing.
Yes.
Just rewind slightly, and then we need to press fast forward a bit. That's incredible. Again, that's incredible. It's the thoughtfulness that I think I want to take away from this interview, because people see you with the bish bash bosh and the, when you first came to the public eye. But in fact, you were already at that point a very thoughtful. To have a plan, how can I get under Gennaro's wing?
Yeah.
Within weeks of arriving in the kitchen, you're looking for the next rung. You're looking for and it's not about ambition, is it? It's about wanting to accrue as much knowledge and access and expertise from these people as you could.
And also, like, I didn't know anyone in London. No one, zero. Me and my missus, that was it. So, like...
Why did she come with you? Just out of love?
I don't know. I think she did love me.
Fancied the ride, fancied the adventure.
it was time to move.
Yeah.
You know, I think, definitely we were in it together, and we had a little studio flat, and we didn't see each other much really, but we didn't really.
You were a team already.
Yeah, we didn't really judge it.
Okay.
Because she knew I had to nail it and put all the graft in. But you know, I think Gennaro was extraordinary in the concept of foraging. He would go out and come back with mushrooms, porcini, wild garlic at this time of the year, and I think our grandparents would have called it scrumping.
Yes,
But and so that really changed me. I think then the passion started to come in,
Right.
because I could kind of draw some kind of greater enjoyment over foraging something, doing something to it accurately, and then someone enjoying it. And the system and the circle was that was more complete. And I think that's when I remember, like, oh yeah, I'm passionate about this.
And did you recognise at this point that you were better at it than a lot of other people as well?
I think better's an interesting word. I would say that I was, because of my youth and training, which gave me a confidence and a kind of a bit more of a 360 radar on the room and what was happening in the room. I think that I was technically better in a few areas. And I think the simplest way to explain that is if you fast forward to, say, The Naked Chef. Really, that book and that series, what was it really about? It wasn't a young boy that was brilliant at a wide bandwidth of cooking. It was amazing salads, amazing grills and roasts, and pasta. That was it. That was The Naked Chef. Actually. Yeah. And risotto.
I've got that. That's the page that's stuck together.
Yeah.
The mushroom risotto with porcini in it. Well, we haven't fast forwarded much, have we? Because presumably not long after you fell under Gennaro's spell, that was the move to the River Cafe as a sous chef shortly afterwards. So again, you couldn't have been in a better place.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really have a sous chef regimental system there. I mean, I guess the conceit of sous chef is, you know, if you can order right menus and get on the phone and do all of that and sort of make it work, which, you know, I did end up doing that. And I was there for like 3 years. But
how did you do that? Why didn't you want to stay at Neal Street for longer, given that you were working with two of the great pioneers of Italian food?
I think that Gennaro, because I was a pastry chef and I was milking as much as I could from him. But I think, like, me and Gennaro, and he was quite a lot older than me.
Yes.
I just remember one day he just grabbed me by the face and said, "It's time to go now, boy."
Oh, mate.
And I'm like,
The
okay.
Godfather.
All right. He goes, look, you know, you need to kind of, and I just bought the River Cafe Blue book, which just like rocked my world. Like, no one designed like that. Obviously, Ruthie and Rose are very creative, very artistic, and Richard Rogers is Ruthie's husband.
Yes.
So they've got banging taste, but also
aesthetics,
simplicity.
Like almost a religion.
Yeah, less is more. And their design was about less is more, and their food was about less is more. And to this very day, they're Ramo, and they could have 3 things on the plate, but they will be the most expensive, incredible things ever.
Which have just arrived from Napoli that morning or something like that.
Or foraged. Or, I mean, also, we were trained in the industry, industry-wide, to have monthly or quarterly menus. Right. That's how we rolled. That's how you get GP. That's how you get consistency. And then we were writing new menus twice a day, every day. 14 menus a week.
Why do you think Gennaro knew that you needed to move on? What do you think? Because that's also, I mean, when you described it then, it was quite loving, that picture.
Yeah, I think it was like, right, you've kind of got everything you need from here.
Yeah.
Move. And that book fell into my hand, and he's like, it looks amazing. And of course, the girls, Rose and Ruthie, weren't chefs.
No.
They were cooks and had spent a lot of time in Italy. And the industry was very driven by intensity, language, drugs, sexism, like loads of stuff you couldn't get away with.
Sure.
Or shouldn't get away with. And
wouldn't now get away with.
No, and shouldn't. It was driven by men.
Right.
And men are incredible for lots of reasons, but like brilliant, productive kitchens have got, you know, loads of girls in.
Yeah.
And the concept was that to do a hard job of a chef, you have to be physical, like you have to be brawn. Absolute rubbish, honestly. Rose and Ruthie, I can't tell you, they because they weren't chefs, they reinvented the norm. And the family tree of talent that has affected this whole country and magazines and writing and design and even the sourcing of ingredients was because of those two women. And I never forget, you know, Rose, who's sadly not with us anymore. We get sous chefs queuing up to work. Not sous chef. We get Michelin-starred senior chefs queuing up to work at the River Cafe, and they come and do a stage. And she'd go, I don't fucking care where you've worked before. This is how we do it. And of course, you know, when you're trained in French regimental, it's brunoise, macédoine, paysanne, julienne, all specific measured cuts of... She's like, no, cut it badly. Squash it.
Handful of this.
Rip it, tear it. No, we don't do it like that. Stop doing it like that. No. That ribolita doesn't want everything the same size. Some cook perfectly, some mush up. That's the point.
And that is where the Naked Chef was born.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Was it?
Without question, because I think, like, I mean, the Naked Chef has got a funny story.
Go on. So for people who don't know, you were there for 3 years, and halfway through, roughly, a film crew turned up.
Yes.
And started making a program about the River Cafe.
Yeah, and you can probably search it on YouTube or something. But basically, I look like a baby. I'm just like a big set of lips on a skeleton, basically. All right, yeah. That's all great. Pucker. That was really me. I did tell you I was a bit of a knob. So the pucker was never fake. I was a knob. There's
nothing knobbish about saying pucker.
Mate, I watch myself, and I'm like, that's me. And what a knob. But I think luckily I had enough information and enthusiasm to balance the knobbiness. Yeah, pucker. How many times can you say pucker in half an hour of BBC broadcast? It's flipping hilarious.
Jump forward.
Anyway,
so the crew liked you. Something happened when the camera was pointing at you.
Technically now, as a producer of TV, what happened was the girls had chosen a handful of really important, brilliant dishes, which, for whatever reason, and I'm not always sure why, some dishes are just harder to film than others. Right? Technically, and in the edit. The edit points are just hard. And then, so they're cutting the program. They've done weeks of filming. And then on this Saturday night, I'm off and Jules is off and the phone rings, right? And they go, we're one man down. And, can you come in tonight and work? And Jules is like, God, we ain't seen each other for 2 weeks. And I come from a family business. So my dad, his advice was always treat other people's business like your own. So, you know, so if the phone rings, answer it. If there's a bucket and a mop in the way, move it. Someone's going to hurt himself. You know, you don't do your job, you look after their business. So, of course, absolutely. Hour and a half, okay. If you get someone to do a bit of prep for me, I'll come in as quickly as I can. And I got in there, so I'm late. I have to catch up. I've got mise en place to do, which is your prep. It's 6 in an hour and a half. So I've got to rattle out a bunch of prep and then get ready for service. And we've got a full house. So being young and the energy to do that and deliver that, I was chasing my tail a bit, and this bloody crew's there with a lens in my face. So the concept of moving the lens out of the way because it was tight wasn't because I was cool. It's because they were in my bloody way. Yeah. And then I was just lucky because HOTS 2 was the fritto misto, and the fritto misto is like an Italian tempura. So you could do zucchini, you could do zucchini flowers, you could do a little sage and an anchovy sandwich, you could do fantastic, beautiful, prime, mid-sized chard leaf, you could do a wonderful porcini, you know, all in a lovely crisp batter with molten sea salt and half a lemon, bosh. And then you'd have like tagliatelle with gyros. Then you'd have a little risotto with smashed peas and broad beans. You know, like I'd have like 4 dishes that were popular, and my section was pumping. But most importantly, for the tech of TV, is it was easy to cut. So
you're being modest.
No, really, because in 30 seconds I could show you and talk you through a recipe.
Right, you are.
And the editor's like, well, I was only after a bit of reportage, but I just got a 5th recipe, and that's what happened. So I ended up all over this show. And I didn't know, because they've been filming for 2.5 weeks. So why would I think that my night would be any different than the whole?
Sure.
You know, and then when it went out, which was, remember, it was Christmas. So like fast forward 5 months. Then when it went out, Boom. The world changed.
Yeah.
And the phones started to ring at work, which is orcs.
Sure.
And
How did that feel? Because what you haven't done, it's a theme that comes up a lot in Unfiltered, is the look at me gene. So it's episode 30 now. Episode 1 was Russell Brand. Russell Brand is like the look at me gene on legs. He was always going to be doing something that demanded attention. Nothing that you've said so far has suggested that you are a show-off or that you need the attention or that even that you're a performer.
At that point, I hadn't even said pucker on TV. Do you know what? I think being philosophical about it, when I look back at it now, with everything that I've learned, it was a real moment for Britain, and it was a real moment for women in Britain, and it was a real moment for food. And I happened to be in the best food place, driven by 2 women. And when I say a moment for women, 30 years before, there was way less women going to work, and women were going to work. But what was happening was after a 10, 12, 13-hour day of husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, they'd all get home, and then men across Britain would look around at their wives and say, what's for dinner? And girls across Britain were going, we're both knackered, right? So then the rhetoric is well, who's going to cook what? Yeah. And it was like pushing on the women still, or you got the convenience option. So that's where Britain was at. And then obviously the Naked Chef was about, well, if that over-enthusiastic young kid can do it, then anyone can. And of course, one of the first things I did with the Naked Chef was, it wasn't in chef what a lot of TV and cooking at the time was chefs, Michelin stars, chefs' jackets, chefs' hats. And I kind of felt that the uniform, possibly rightfully so, but definitely with other experts like pilots and surgeons and doctors, it felt like an expertise dividing the public from...
Well, funnily enough, the 2 books I had then would have been yours and Gary Rhodes, actually. And Gary Rhodes was a very brilliant chef, but very much the opposite of what you were. That he was the whites, the crisp linens, and the technical
flat top haircut.
Yeah, that's it. I do. But it was about the same time, wasn't it? Yeah. And then you were the one.
I was just after him.
Right, there you go. So that's why I had both books. And you were the one where I thought, well, yeah, I can have a crack at a risotto.
I think my youth was a real benefit, and I think the food was easy, simple, and tasty and contemporary, or felt it that way. But I also think that a lot of my very quick fame was, and it was like unusually so.
What was that like? Because
well, being honest,
within a week,
it was like One Direction.
Well, yeah, of course.
It went nuts.
Yeah.
And for about a year and a half.
Did you enjoy it?
Well, for the first 6 months, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm like, just a minute, people think what I've got to say is interesting, and it was just all new and interesting, and like things I'd never, ever dream of were asking me to do it and get paid for it. And it's like, oh my God. And
what did your mum think, Jamie? What did your mum think?
I think mum and dad were both proud, excited, but
scared.
Probably quite scared. Yeah. Like, what on earth is he? This is like another level. And
you still had that dickhead side as well going
definitely.
On. So they'd be worried that you might muff it up or become a cropper.
Yeah, definitely.
But you didn't.
Luckily not. I mean, I think mum and dad were strong. Jules was a sort of a solidity in my life that was there, and she's always telling me to not be a dickhead, and still does. Don't swear, which I've messed that one up tonight. So, but I was only swearing because that's what happened then. It's not what I'm saying now.
It's the language of the kitchen as well.
But it was a really interesting moment. Like most of it, if you look at the tear sheets of the press, it was women's magazines, teen magazines, and if you look at the papers and the tabloids, it was using me, sometimes maybe unfairly, as a weapon against the other chefs to kick them up the arse.
Yeah.
And that's why most chefs hated me for about 5 years.
Genuinely?
Oh, my God.
Just little upstart.
So what happened is the public loved me, and the book sales went nuts. We sold a couple of million books before you could even wink. And I went from being skint to having money in the bank. And I'm 24, going just to... 25, what just happened here? But it was a good book, and I did put my heart and soul into it. But at the same time, my own industry that I was born into thought, who is that little shite?
Which must have been annoying because you had the nous, you had the background,
and
you'd done your Spurs, hadn't you?
Exactly, and I had a lot of my child and teen idols that I adored hate me.
Yeah.
And it was basically about book sales because I'd basically sold more than them put together for the decade before in 6 months.
And they'd know that.
And it was annoying.
Yeah.
And I was a bit puckered up, and I was enthusiastic, but Christ almighty, look at what was happening. And then women started getting their boys to cook. So there was, like, for me, a very definitive 2 years when not just my industry hated me, but men they weren't too keen either.
Right.
So I got roughed up a few times, chased a few times.
Seriously?
Yeah, because there were women around the country going, listen, you got to cook twice a week.
Yeah.
If he can, you can.
Yeah.
And of course it was right. But as typically with men, which is brilliant, and I believe this 100%, men in short term saw me as an annoyance and depending on what was said at the sofa watching me,
yes,
like competition or a threat. But we had to take men from a place where cooking was for girls to a place where cooking got you girls. And the minute that boys got laid more because of the Naked Chef, then they stopped roughing me up, basically. So I became an ally, not a kind of like a problem. And for me, like, I was at the sharp end of it. And I was doing book sign, and in those days, you do like 30, 40 book signings. Jeez. Like you know, I used to have like ripped, like tough looking boys queue up for 2 hours for a book signing. And
thanks, mate.
Yeah. But when they were a meter away, they'd feel all insecure. Yeah. What on earth have I just spent 2 hours? And I'm 35 years old, and I'm waiting for a 25-year-old kid to sign my book.
Because I like,
and of course, and then they'd start abusing me.
Oh Lord!
But then I'd have to kind of use my skills that you would learn dealing with customers in a pub, and go, I don't think he does hate me.
No. Okay.
So I got to put that. So then you kind of have to work it, and then you disarm them, and then you realise it was like a thing. So all the tough-looking boys. And then I'd have to nip it in the bud. Like, no, don't worry, mate. You get up, give them special, like, almost be subservient. You don't say sir, but you stand up, you shake their hand.
Your whole life was a preparation for this without anybody realising it.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Basically. And
which is why you managed to cope with it.
I think so. And but those book signings, weirdly, again, was the only real data we had in those days. Because as you know, the TV rating systems is ABC 1 to 900 boxes around the country. You're paid to write what really happens, what really does happen, who knows. I know I've done shows that are rated really well and rated low. And I've got shows that rated low that no one saw, rated high that I don't think anyone saw. So we know that it's not perfect, but it's consistently imperfect. But of course, now we have social media and comments and data and likes and hashtags. But in those days, the only truth was the book signings. And you would have to, and also it was pre-phones with cameras.
Wow.
So you could have a conversation with people.
Really interesting.
So if I do a book signing now, I don't talk to no one. Sure. Not really. Hello, all right.
Yeah,
picture.
Selfie.
It's just a trophy picture. Selfie. So in those days, we used to talk.
And that was your market research and your
what did you cook? What did you like? What would you like next time?
Right.
What do you think I should do next?
We've got 10 minutes left. So what we're going to do, oddly, is we're going to skip over the restaurants. We're going to skip over the TV series and the moving into opening your own restaurants, and we're going to move instead to 15 and the question of why you felt the need to help other people when you were already helping people indirectly, as you've just described very eloquently. You were changing people's lives. You were changing family dynamics. You were changing the domestic
the conversation in food.
Exactly. So what happened? Was 15 the first real outbreak of altruism?
Yeah.
So this was, for people who don't know, this was when you decided not just to help people who couldn't cook, but people who had really fallen off the planet a bit, people who were really on their uppers, homeless people often.
Yeah, we had homeless people, people from prison, people that had come from prison or been in prison, or just kids that were lost or didn't quite know.
Where did that come from?
Well, I think a lot of people try and like make it look seem that it was kind of founded around like kindness or concern or charity. I think it could be looked at that at a different point, but right then, that age, I'd gone from being skint to having money. Like
shed loads of money.
Quite a lot. Yeah, I think I can give you the exact amount I had in the bank at that stage. I had 1.2 million quid in the bank. And actually, no, that's a lie. No, that is a lie. That is a lie. I had £880,000 in the bank. That's what I had. And the budget for 15 was 650 grand. And the reason I did it is because I liked the idea, I could, and I did. It's as simple as that. It's no more overly thoughtful. Like I liked the idea, and I thought, right, I'm going to get amongst this. Of course, fundamentally, it changed me massively. And then behind the scenes, without me knowing, it became the first bit of social work that I did.
Yes.
And it's taking kids that maybe hadn't had the childhood, maybe had the education I had, but hadn't had the childhood I'd had.
So you weren't thinking, I want to help people. You were thinking, you thought of an idea and you thought, I want to do this, and it helps people, which gave it a whole new momentum. And so,
can we open a restaurant that has radical change of the person at its heart? And the system said no. That the system in many governments around the world is very, very bad at making radical change of people of crime. The reoffending rates, as you know, of young kids within the first 3-4 years is terrible. And 15 was all the opposite of that. We are, and we did become very good at radically changing kids that had rough backgrounds. You can say bottom of the barrel if you want. Become leaders. And graduate. We've had over 400 graduates. And there's a handful or several handfuls now where technically they're better than me now, 15 years on, and a couple have been responsible for Michelin stars and have Michelin stars. I don't. No. So
you won't ever, will you? It's not.
I think I might do it for a laugh one year.
Just
it's not really me.
High-end restaurant.
But I don't really. It's not really me. But I will do it one year. I might be old, but I will do it for a laugh.
Sometimes I think you've cloned yourself when you start talking about that. There's 3 or 4 of you all off doing different things. So that launched what you just described as the social work. That evolved into the school dinners campaign. Again,
yes.
Now that I've understood it better, again, it was the project that appealed, including the altruism and the social work.
The food was just the meat around the bones of an idea.
Bingo, the turkey twizzler.
And also I was learning, don't forget that I was right and wrong through mistakes and successes. I was learning what is the press, what is the structure of the press.
Of course.
Radio.
Because this was the first time you put your head above the parapet, wasn't it? Because as soon as you start telling people that they should be behaving differently, you're painting a target on your ass, which you hadn't had before.
Well, I think so. I mean, even like when we filmed Jamie's Kitchen, which was 15, it was a young kid starting a business, telling kids what to do.
Yeah, so again,
and mentoring. And so that was like unusual, right?
Yeah.
And it rated really well. We'd rattle out 4.5, 5 million viewers, easy peasy on that one. But then School Dinners was, I think it was like that. I don't do it anymore really, but I used to go to a few red carpet gigs in those days just because it was exciting, and I'd never done anything like that before. Go and see, some film and, see it first. And so obviously you do the kind of red carpet and you do the pictures and you do your interviews. And I was a bit loose with my mouth as usual. And the press narrative was, is school dinners bad? Are they rubbish?
Yeah.
And I added to that fire by saying, yes, it is, and it's wrong. And of course, then it gets projected because of who I am. And the story gets bigger and bigger, which is understandable. And then my old man just sort of said, well, you don't talk about it, do something about it.
Did he really?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. So what he would do about it would be within his gift.
Yes.
But obviously my gift is a different machine now.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I've got money.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not quite true. The restaurant went over budget, and I was actually officially bankrupt for 3 weeks. But thank God, Penguin, God bless, and thank God they're your publisher. They gave me a book royalty check that saved the day. And I didn't tell you that the builders, the designers, and everyone else, it was all going nuts. Anyway, but
so you came out at the end.
But I could. School Dinners was amazing. It was like, and I think also...
That was when you split in two, wasn't it? That was when you became both campaigner and... Because even with 15, you were still a chef, just teaching other people how to be a chef. School Dinners was when you went like that.
Yeah.
And you split yourself in two. And business-wise, because we were talking before, you've now brought all of these strands of your professional life back together, which leads us, almost with perfect timing, to... the obesity strategy, which you thought, because we've spoken a few times over the years, you thought you'd got that over the line with David Cameron. Along comes Theresa May. It looks like it's getting kicked into touch. And today, by coincidence, it's back on the table again.
Yeah, so when obviously the chaos of Brexit and everything happened, Theresa or Theresa's government or her advisors I've never spoken to her since then, and we had no access to government, having had full access in its original creation.
Under Blair and Cameron.
The childhood obesity strategy was Cameron. And to give you, it was a robust sort of 35-page document. I think it published at 13. So much didn't get done.
Sure.
All the words were should, voluntary, and the only thing in there that was actually changed was a sugary drinks tax, which was a narrative that I'd driven. It was a discussion in Parliament that I'd forced through using the campaigns. The public forced that with me, and Mr. Osborne made that decision. So actually, it was a terrible childhood obesity strategy. Although they said it was world-beating, it wasn't.
Right.
So now the dust has settled. I think we could forgive her for the chaos of the time, but we definitely can't forgive her for a bad second chapter.
Right.
And what is really exciting about today is probably for a year and a half, we've been trying to get cross-party agreement on the principles of what is a logical and robust childhood obesity strategy. So basically what we're saying is there is no political argy-bargy for you, Theresa May, to do the right thing. Theresa, just do your job and we won't get in your way. We'll support you.
Why do you care so much about other people's children?
It's a really, really good question. When I started 15, there was a little change. I had my first child, Poppy, the same time I took those kids on who were 16 and 18 in those days. My daughter's now 16.
Gosh.
There is a fundamental change as a parent. It could be romantic. It could be just be it. Yeah. But in those days, before it got trendy, where 15 is in Owen Street Roundabout was rough. Yeah. And we went there because it was cheap. And there was loads of gangs around and it was a bit touch and go at night. And when I'd see, day after day, you'd see these reprobates hanging about, sort of shouting, screaming, throwing stuff around, kicking stuff. And when I had Poppy, I just really clearly felt that's someone's kids. And I know it's really romantic, but they're not just a pain in the arse, they're someone's kids. And of course, through 15, it's like possible potential. And then like, look, being dyslexic, and I try and say this to kids, is such an incredible gift if you can just listen to it. Like I regularly have conversations with really amazing, incredible, wonderful, bright, scientific, Oxford University, Cambridge University, Yale, Harvard graduates, and they're too clever to fix important problems. They're too clever, right? And I am not that clever. But what I am, if you look at anything I've done in 20 years, nothing's clever. It's all common sense. And any good class of 10-year-olds could come up with the same ideas. And I think fundamentally what's really wrong about the progress of protecting child health, right? If anyone, honestly, like I've spoken to Mark Carney, who's head of the Bank of England, right? You can go to the best economist in Oxford, right? You can talk to the brains, right? If you care about yourself, which should mean, a nicer environment to live in, earning good money, having opportunity, having a safe place to go, having your family fixed up if they get ill. If you care about strong and stable, in my mind, you have to protect child health. Child health is strong and stable, right? It ain't the adults now that are going to be driving Britain forward to be the economical, incredible thing that it has been and could be.
Mate? Why you?
Well, I tell you what frustrates me is CEOs, CFOs, and ministers that are entrusted with the power to make a difference and sell, feed, or sculpt the landscape that we live in. Average 3 years in the job. Right. And by then they're just learning their stuff. And then there's people like me, people like Hugh Fearnley-Whittenstall. There's many sort of people, campaigners, NGOs, charities that care, deeply care. I'm the youngest. I've been doing it 15 years. Like there's people been doing it for 20, 25, 30. I know one that's been doing it for 50 years who's like beyond genius. And we are a consistent. Yeah. And you don't have to like me. You don't have to like me to believe me. Like I can guarantee you one thing. Like
how much does it bother you when people don't like you?
Of course, it upsets me. I've had to become tough, and I think it affects me in ways that I can't quite measure. It just has a little cloud over my life when it gets. I've particularly had quite a hard 3 or 8 months. Has been quite tough. Not just in work, not just in the press, but also personal challenges with friends and families and people passing away and just stuff that is life.
Yes.
You know, but
you live your life very much in the glare.
Yes, I mean, I made a choice to be open,
sure,
and even down to my family, because some people are very protective about their family, but to show yourself cooking with kids is a gift. Yeah. It's normal. It's a joy, you know. So, and they're on the journey with me, and I want to do my kids proud. And by the way, like with a 16-year-old, I can be an embarrassment, right?
I'm sure.
So I got to do the right thing, but I think we can fix this. And it's not that it comes back to food, and that is my expertise. Granted, disadvantaged kids are disproportionately affected by the rage and ravage of an obesogenic environment. Obesity and diet-related disease is a normal response to an abnormal environment, and everyone. And this is a very and even. I hear it from some of your colleagues that I also love. Yeah. Most of Britain's middle class, right? And we live in an amazing country. And common sense prevails, and personal responsibility prevails, and parents should parent kids. All right, yeah, lovely. I agree with all of that, right? But that don't help the most vulnerable, right? And I think that the middle classes and the larger proportion of Britain is affected more than they will ever give credit to by how bad is bad in this country, how costly and how bad and how hideous is bad, and that is that and that concept of nourishment in the stomach or the mind and schools, safety, human rights. The concept of that is not just an economic cost that's crippling many things. It's also it is crime, and it is, of course, crime in all its and it is and it's culture, you know, because Britain is, you know, because culture's based around many things, as we know, but it's art, it's music. You know, a country has to get a point where there's a bit of spare cash to go out and do things, sing, have concerts, have art, have museums, right? And I think it's been a miserable 10 years, guys.
Feels that way.
But I do think it's not us and them. Yeah. So when people talk about a childhood obesity strategy, these are all really basic, simple things that some you'll know about, right? So is it okay to target junk food advertising to kids when they're queuing up at a bus stop on a digital screen, right? And relentlessly just give them shite? Is that okay? Yes or no? Okay, fine. If we have regulation already that protects kids and kids' channels from junk food advertising to 6 o'clock, if we know they're not there, if we know they're from 6 until 9 and it's Britain's Got Talent X Factor, and if we know they watch the whole season and they've seen after the season a film's worth of junk food advertising, is that okay when 1 in 3 kids goes to secondary school overweight or obese, and therefore has a less productive and more costly effect on our beautiful country? And I think no and no. Is it okay?
Short-termism.
Yeah, and whether it's energy drinks, is it okay to feed 10-year-olds energy drinks? Protect them. Law, bing bong.
But you also, I mean, we're finished, and yet it feels like we've just begun a whole new chapter, because I couldn't agree with you more doing what I do for a living. The idea that they're all separate is insane. Absolutely insane. What's
frightening is the righteous narrative of common sense. And I grew up in that kind of slightly Daily Mail kind of us and them mentality. We have to try and curate. And I've tried to curate, and I've failed thus far very. I did a thing on holiday hunger last year that's an incredibly important dark part of our society. This is
when kids on free school meals don't eat in the day.
When they're on the school holidays. So that same 40 quid, 50 quid of the poorest families, mums, you know, that are probably on benefits because they got a free school lunch, right? Yeah. Or they've had free breakfast and lunch or food for the day, and then they're on holidays and they got to stretch money. And so the social issues that happened, I've tried to tell that story well, and it got the reverse effect, because it becomes about ponces, us and them. You know, you just need to get a job and sort yourself out. But the thing is, you cannot get a job when you're worried about Johnny getting fed. And you cannot worry about 5 fruit and veg a day when Johnny's just hungry and you ain't got the cash. So I think the beautiful thing about the childhood obesity strategy is most of the weapons in the artillery of the attack, public will never know about.
Yeah. Yeah.
The public, all the good work, because actually changing people's habits is the hardest bit.
It's incremental, isn't it? It's tiny little building and building and building.
But regulations, reformulation, essentially the short job of the job to look after British kids at its most basic is there's too many calories in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So and I don't need to give you advice because you're the best of the best, but my only advice when you hear brilliant rhetoric about personal responsibility and choice, my only thing to say is choice, or a concept of democracy, is about choice. If you go to a vending machine and it's only crap, that's not choice, that's not democracy. No, yeah. You need a structure to do it because while the cats are away, the mice still play. Yeah. If you go to a petrol station and it's only crap, right? The amount of calories that petrol stations output into the atmosphere.
Trying to buy fruit at a petrol station is like looking for...
You need choice. You need choice. Sure. If it's about bog-offs, look, I got no problems with bog-offs, but at least choice or democracy would be 50-50. Well, it ain't. It's skewing 80%.
Always the fact.
So I think as you go through the list... You know, what we require to get the job done, because this isn't hard. Everyone's going to tell you it's hard. To get the job done is a unified, strategic, clever war against childhood obesity and child health. And it is totally doable and it's totally in our gift. And the politicians just have to do their job.
And you're more optimistic now than you have been at any point in the last 10 years? With the thing today, we need to be brief.
Yes,
You have to be.
I am optimistic because we have won some battles before. Yeah. Like a month ago, I got every supermarket, every cinema, Boots to absolutely categorically agree to not sell energy drinks to kids. Now they're asking me, having been pushed, to commit to make it legislation so the corner shops don't become the laggards.
Yeah, of course.
So I think every time we win a battle and every time it's righteous, we now got to stop talking about one thing, because obviously I can only tell my story one at a time, and you've seen me every time I've done a one-er.
Yeah.
And everyone keeps telling me it's not about one thing. I know.
No, of course.
But it's very hard to get in the papers talking about 50... Well, honestly, 250 things. Sure. There's 250 things on the shopping list.
Final question. I'm going to channel Mr. Richards from Westminster Technical College, and I'm going to ask you where you want to be in 10 years.
Okay. My hope and my dream for the 2030 project, which is now off, is that we halve childhood obesity by 2030, and within the body of that progression is structure to get us back. What we crave for is not the holy grail. We are realistic. What we crave for is the statistics health-wise for our children of 2000, the millennia. Dude, under our watch in 18 years, we have done a disservice to kids. We have done a disservice to working mums that have put more money in the pot for tax, and they've had not enough of money or love or care or observation about what understandably needs to be put in place as more mums and dads work. And I think we need to make Britain parent focused. We've got to help parents be the best they can be. We've got to support them to do the best they can, no matter who they are, wherever they are. And I really believe, and because it's not about so much the food, it's about health, being optimal, being productive. British people being productive so we can do what we're set at. And we've got great history. Look, we're a service industry, creative industry. We should be scared right now, by the way. India is banging. Like, China's banging. Brazil is banging, right? America is always smugly one. They own the system. They are, you know what I mean? Like, so, like, don't go thinking we're all cute. Royal Britannia. Yeah, I love my country as much as anyone else. This ain't cute. If you're even interested in UK PLC, right? It has to be driven by child health. Those teenagers, those young parents being full of energy, creatively enriched, and not worrying about them or their parents dying too young of type 2 diabetes.
It's funny, you know, because I was asking more about what you wanted for yourself.
Oh.
No, don't answer it, because I asked you what you wanted, where you wanted to be in 10 years' time, and you told us where you wanted the country and other people's children to be in 10 years' time, and that is the point that we leave it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm James O'Brien. Thank you for watching this episode of Unfiltered. Not only is there plenty more where that came from, but there's plenty more to come as well. So make sure you subscribe to Unfiltered and put yourself at the front of the queue for all forthcoming interviews.